Right, good morning everybody. My name is Bryn Hurren and I'm chairing the meeting today. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that your microphone is turned off when not in use and that you do not disturb other speakers. That if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure also your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And just to say, we will be using e-voting for this meeting today on the modern Gov app. I would like to remind everybody that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcasting and or future training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Officers in attendance today, we have Tom Barker, the Monitoring Officer, Melissa Evans, Director of Finance and Procurement, John Snell, our Head of Internal Audit, Alyssa Norman, Deputy Monitoring Officer, and also Bethany Webb to my left, who is the Governance Support Officer. We also have as a guest today Debbie Hanson from Ernst & Young for item 7. I will now move to the agenda, please. Bethany, do we have any apologies for absence and or substitutes?
None received, Chair.
Any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? You can shout now, or if something comes up in the meeting you're unsure about, just ask at the time, but none at the moment. Thank you. I'd just like now to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of April. Now, are there any points regarding the accuracy of these minutes? In which case, if there's not, I'll ask for a proposer and seconder. Tim, Councillor Register proposing?
No, I was actually going to ask for the additional sentence, which I think Mr. Snell was going to suggest on 74.3.
Oh, yes.
Have you some words that would go to Bethany now? Or it's just an additional. I think the answer did also say what would or would not happen in terms of follow-up to audit recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So what I'll do is I'll go away and actually craft some words just to sort of finalise it and sort of form the circle, and then I'll issue that either myself or through Beth just to reflect the accuracy of the minutes.
Thank you. Apart from that, I'd be delighted to second the minutes.
Yeah, would you just quickly like to remind us which paragraph it was in the minutes?
74.3 on page 8.
So we all know what we're talking about. Yeah.
The answer was rather fuller than what's there in terms of the follow-up.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, we did touch upon that on the briefing, but with Mr. Snell's answer, you're happy to second the minutes?
Yes.
Okay then, that will be an electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Riley, do you want me to take your vote verbally?
I spotted that. Thank you, Councillor Riley.
I'm just trying to vote in favour.
Do you want to take yours verbally, Councillor Thompson?
Vote it.
Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
Thank you, councillors. Any petitions handed in?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And any questions by the public?
None received, Chair.
Questions by councillors?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So that moves us on to item 7, Audit Plan Statement of Accounts 24-25. Now from Ernst Young we have Debbie Hanson. Thank you very much for coming, and I wasn't aware that you were bringing your friend with you. So if he speaks, or maybe you can tell us who he is, please, that would be very helpful just for the meeting. But welcome to you both to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So my colleague is Julio Cam, so I'll let Julio introduce himself.
Good morning. Thank you,
Good
Chair.
morning. Thank you.
My name is Julio Kim. I'm the Senior Manager responsible for the audit of Bayberg and Mid Suffolk District Councils. Thank you.
That's lovely. Welcome to Bayber Mid Suffolk.
Thank you.
If you'd like to present the report between you and cover what is in here. We've all read it, obviously, but let's have your take on it, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
If you could speak into the microphone, Debbie, or as close as you can.
Is that close enough?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yes, the atmospherics in here aren't brilliant, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. We've obviously got plans on the agenda for both Bayber and Mid Suffolk. The plans are largely the same, therefore I'll take you through the Bayber one first, and then I'll just highlight the things that are different in the Mid Suffolk one, if that's okay. By way of background, obviously we're in quite an unusual situation still, in the fact that 23-24 was disclaimed, as were a number of the prior years. So 24-25 will be the first year that we're undertaking an audit of the financial statements for a number of years. For that reason, the 24-25 opinion will again be disclaimed, and that's because we don't have assurance over comparative balances that are included in the statement of accounts or the opening balances, and that also impacts on a number of the movements in year. There has been guidance issued on rebuild, which is the first stage of the sort of process. Because of the position we're in, it's unlikely that we'll be in a position of issuing an unmodified opinion until around 27-28. So it's likely to be, again, a disclaimed opinion this year, and next year, with 26-27, could well be a modified opinion on the basis of except for. So we will be saying we've got assurance over a number of the balances, but there are some we still won't have full assurance over. And then hopefully moving to 27-28, when we'll be in a position of unmodified. Obviously, local government reorganisation and devolution will be impacting alongside that, which will make that additionally complicated. The LARIG has now been issued by the NAO, which is basically guidance for all audit firms on rebuilding assurance. That was issued earlier this month. We as EY are now in the process of considering that guidance. What that makes clear is that the key area of the accounts where it's more difficult to rebuild assurance is around the reserves balance, which is obviously a balance which is of key interest to a reader of the accounts. And that's because the reserves balance is driven by all of the movements in the I&E each year, and because we haven't audited the income and expenditure account for a number of years, how we rebuild that assurance is probably going to be quite a challenge. So at the moment we are working through that consideration. We're unlikely to be really trying to rebuild that assurance this year, but we'll start to look at that in 25-26 in terms of how we can start to rebuild that position. So having given you that background information, if I take you through on page 19 of the report, we set out the key risks that we've identified in relation to financial statements. I would note that there's quite a high number of risks, I would say, in the plan, so I will talk you through those, and obviously if members have got questions about those, very happy to discuss in further detail. So the first risk area we have identified is misstatements due to fraud and error. You'll find that in every audit plan for either local authorities or corporate bodies, because it's driven by the auditing standards, which require us to presume that there's a risk of management override of controls, which could lead to financial misstatements in the accounts. The way we address that risk is through some standard procedures where we look at journals, we look at key estimates and any unusual transactions. We then also consider whether there's any specific areas of the accounts where there may be an increased risk of management override, and the area we identify for all local authorities is incorrect capitalisation of revenue spend or incorrect classification as, of expenditure as REFCUS, so that's revenue expenditure financed by capital under statute. The reason we identify those two areas is because they are ways of getting expenditure permanently out of the income expenditure account, and enables the council to finance those from capital reserves rather than from the general fund balance and therefore council tax. So we always see that as a potential area of risk, and it does involve some judgment in terms of assessing whether expenditure is capital or revenue in nature. We then, because of the nature of the joint working arrangements between Baber and Mid Suffolk, we also identify potential risk of error in terms of recharges between the two councils. So that's not specifically an area we've found issues with in the past, but we do identify that as an area where there could be deliberate movement of funds or expenditure between the two councils to improve the position of one council over the other. We then have a number of areas of significant risk, again, very common to local authority accounts. So we have valuation of land and buildings. They are highly material values in the council's accounts. They are based on estimates and judgments, and therefore small errors or changes in those judgments could result in significant changes in the values in the accounts. And again, because we haven't audited the accounts for a number of years, we don't have a lot of assurance over those balances. So we're expecting to utilise support from our specialist valuation team to assist the audit team in that work. A specific area this year where we've identified a significant risk is the change of the finance system. Again, that would always present a significant risk. It's the key system that drives all the financial statements, and therefore if there's errors in data transfer or problems with the implementation of the system, again, that could lead to misstatements in the financial statements. We are again engaging specialists within EY from our IT team to support us in that work. IFRS 16 is a new risk area in all local authority accounts for 24-25. The SITFA code has deferred the implementation of the new leases standard for a number of years, but that has now come in for 24-25. The key risk areas there are around completeness, so ensuring that you've identified all relevant leases, and then that you've actually applied the standard correctly, and that will bring onto balance sheet a number of right-of-use assets that were not previously on the council's balance sheet. So again, that is in all of our audit plans this year. We then move on to pension liability valuation. So these areas are higher inherent risk, not significant risk, but they are still areas we will do more work on. So again, very similar to land and buildings, the pension liability is a highly material figure. It is based on, again, estimates and judgments provided by the actuary. So again, we engage our own EY actuaries to support us in that work. Then we have group accounts consolidation. Both councils have a number of subsidiaries and joint ventures, and there's always risks around the consolidation of those balances to ensure that intercompany transactions are correctly removed and that the balances are correctly brought forward and consolidated. We then have valuation of investment property. We've separated that from property, plant and equipment. It is valued on a different basis, but the values are not as large, so we've included that as a higher inherent risk. And then if we move on to the next page, we've got a further 3 risks. So we have community infrastructure levy, where when we did the last audit of the financial statements, we did identify some errors in accounting for that. So again, we've included that to ensure that those balances are correctly accounted for this year. We've also noted that the council has a loan to Baber Growth, and we've included a minimum revenue provision in terms of ensuring that that is correctly reflected in that calculation, which is a very important calculation for the council to ensure that you are setting aside funds for repayment of loans appropriately. And then we've also noted that there's been a change in the HRA depreciation policy this year with increasing the useful lives of assets in that housing revenue account. So we've identified that as a risk area in terms of assessing whether that's been applied appropriately. We then on the next page set out the materiality level. Obviously we calculate separate materiality levels for each council based on gross expenditure. For both councils we've based that on 2% of the 23-24 gross expenditure at the moment. Obviously, once we get the accounts later this week, we will update that materiality calculation. And then we set something called performance materiality, which is a level at which we actually undertake our testing procedures, and that's to build in some headroom for potential undetected errors. We've set that at 50% because of the fact that we haven't done an audit for a number of years, therefore we have less assurance around the control environment. So those are the main areas. In terms of another key area to highlight to you is in relation to group arrangements. So as I've highlighted, the councils have got a number of different subsidiaries. There is a revised auditing standard, ISA 600, that's come into effect this year, which requires group auditors, which is what we are, because we give an opinion on the group financial statements. And it requires us to do more detailed procedures around the risk assessment from a group perspective, and to do additional procedures in relation to that. So we've included more detail in the audit plan in relation to the group scoping. And we will be issuing group instructions to the component auditors once we've got the financial statements this week. So very much our procedures to address those risks will be placing reliance on those component auditors, but we will need to undertake file reviews of their work, liaise with them on a regular basis to ensure that we are in a position where we can place that reliance. We've identified the scoping of those arrangements, so we have basically 2 full scope arrangements in addition to the council. So we've got Sifco Capital and Great Gateway 14, which are both full scope, so we will be issuing more detailed group instructions. And then in relation to Suffolk Holdings and Suffolk Growth, we'll be issuing specific instructions to the component auditors. So that means there are just certain balances that we'll be asking them to provide assurance over, and again, we've detailed those within the plan. The other area to draw to your attention is value for money. So we haven't yet fully completed all of our VFM planning procedures. So I'm not in a position, unfortunately, to update you as to whether we've identified any risks of significant weakness at this stage. Once we have fully completed those procedures, we will share any risks that we've identified back with this committee, and we'll obviously report those in our audit results report. I think the only other key area that we're still waiting to complete is our data analytics. So our audit approach is very much data-driven, and we have a specialist IT team that do that work. Again, I think because we haven't done an audit for a number of years, that's been a little bit more challenging in terms of getting the data in the right format and ensuring it's appropriate. So we haven't yet concluded our work in that area because we haven't managed to run the full data analytics pack, but we will be doing that before we commence the audit. We've included the timelines of the audit in there as well. So we were starting our detailed work in September, but we'll be doing some sample selection earlier than that. The aim is to then complete in November, and the NAO have set a deadline of the end of November for all auditors to report their value for money work and issue the auditor's annual report. So the intention was we will issue that in November. We will issue our auditor's results report, which sets out the financial statements, conclusions, in December probably, and that's the date we're planning to issue our actual audit opinion on the financial statements, which is in advance of the statutory deadline at the end of February next year. Very happy to take any questions. I won't go through in more detail. I guess the only point to note is in relation to the Mid-Suffolk plan, the risks are largely the same with the exception of the MRP risk and investment property, which solely sit in the Bayber plan, so they are not risks within the Mid-Suffolk plan. But I'm very happy to take any questions or comments on the plans.
Yes, thank you very much. There'll be general questions in a moment, but I was going to ask you how many more years is this going to go on? Because obviously as chair it puts a lot of work on my shoulders. Yeah, I can see you cannot give an accurate answer to that, but you're confident that you are climbing out of the trough, so to speak. I understand that if you haven't got a starting point, it's very difficult to have an end point on the accounts, but it looks like 3 or 4 more years of struggle, really, and possibly more. And as you may be aware, we're facing government review and a different sort of local governments. So it looks like we will carry this on to the next phase. But your first bullet point, you said insufficient capacity within the local authority accountant profession. Is that more aimed at us or yourselves or right across the board, I suppose? You're just saying there's a lack of people to do anything, I take it.
I think it is a national issue, so it's not specific to your council and it's not specific to EY as a firm. Obviously, the whole sector got in a position where there was a significant backlog of many local authority accounts, and because there was not a statutory date by which opinions had to be issued, in effect, work continued to try to conclude those accounts. In terms of capacity, I think there is a skill issue across local authority accounts. Local authority accounts have got far more complex than they used to be. So I guess your accounts are an example of you have group accounts, whereas probably 10 years ago there were relatively few local authorities that had companies related to them to produce and requiring group accounts. There's also the complexities of capital financing, MRP. So I think there is an issue with skills across the sector, and that has led to a number of delays in opinions being issued. Local authority accounts are also quite complex. I think for many years CIPFA has been talking about simplifying local government accounts, but we see them get probably more complex and larger. So I think that's why there's three phases of the kind of fixing the problem in effect. So there's the reset, which is what we're in at the moment. Then there's the recovery period, which is where we'll be next year starting to do that. And then there's the reform, which is around potentially changing the local authority accounts. And I know some of the proposals have been around pensions and PPE, which we've noted are risk areas. And there have been options, I think, put forward to local authorities that they may not have to value all of their assets every year or every 5 years, which is what currently happens. And instead they could apply indices to bases. But again, that brings with it its own challenges in terms of have you got comfort over the base that you apply those indices to, and then how do you know which are the correct indices to apply? So it's not necessarily a simple fix, but it is an option that's been put forward that some local authorities have taken that option, some haven't. But yes, it's a national issue. It's not specific to Mid-Suffolk, I would say.
Yes, I think from our point it puts more pressure on us because we're having to sort of be extra diligent to answer your questions, to make sure that our processes are perfect, and to give the assurance that even though we're not having a proper external audit, we are doing our best to make sure that in a way we're making up for you. I don't mean that as a derogatory comment, but we are doing quite a bit of extra work or your work to help you. It's a joint process in managing the situation, isn't it? But yeah, second question before I throw the meeting open. Do you have extra sort of scoping missions or talks with our Section 151 officer, do you, for guidance? Because the thing that worries me, if we're missing something, we maybe haven't got the extra eyes to spot it, you see, so it could be carried on. I know it's not the intention and we're all working hard, but the safety of an external audit just isn't quite there anymore from our councillor's point of view. And I just wanted reassurance that in the absence of a complete audit, we're working together to do the best we can otherwise.
So for 24-25, we are undertaking a full audit. So we are undertaking an audit that we would normally undertake it. So that will give you assurance in terms of the processes. I suspect, as I said, because an audit has not been done for a number of years, that it's more likely that we will identify issues. And that's certainly been my experience last year when we did audits for the first time on some councils that hadn't had opinions for a few years or had disclaimed opinions. That, again, you know, the council's not used to having an audit undertaken. We haven't looked at things for a number of years. We were also a new team, so myself and Julio are both new to the audit. Quite often a fresh pair of eyes does identify issues as well. We will not, as I said, we will still issue a disclaimed opinion because we don't have those assurances of specific areas, but we are still undertaking all of our normal audit procedures. What we're not doing is we're not doing extra work to rebuild assurance. So you will still be getting a full audit that will hopefully give you that assurance and identify any areas where there are improvements required.
Reassuring anyway, thank you for that. Yeah, questions? Yeah, Councillor Baker first and then Councillor Matheson.
Morning. Hello. So I have a couple of specific questions, but generally this causes me quite a lot of anxiety. I'm sure it does all of you guys as well. When you start to layer up the levels of risk, obviously you've got sort of several years of audits that weren't done, and it's the opening and closing balances that can't be assured, and then you've got a change in finance system, and then we're about to go into some form of unitary, where councils come together, and then obviously there'll be different accountancy systems as well. And so the level of risk, when you start to sort of pile all this up, I can kind of see it a few years down the line, you know, some headline in the newspaper, you know, somewhere, that it's a bit of a worry. Now, a couple of my questions are, one of them, when we go into unitary, in relation to assuring accounts, if a couple of councils were to go together, for example, and the previous year's accounts were not assured, is there so many years before the new unitaries accounts will be assured? Does it start again? Is there another time period and a barrier in that regard? So I'm sort of wondering, what year are we looking at once we become a unitary as to when we can say those accounts assured, because everything's going to be thrown up in the air again. And the other thing is around the 3-drawer kind of rule. The top drawer is finances that sort of members of the public, things are aware of. Middle drawer is, what members are aware of. Bottom drawer is where the seniors, auditors, where there's things. And I'm wondering about the levels of mitigation, if there's things in those bottom drawers that you guys can look at as an additional, given the risks that we've got layering here. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I can answer all the questions though, but in terms of, as you say, the level of risk in the plans, I think is quite high. Most of my sort of district council plans would not have that same number of risks. So as you say, the new finance system, the fact it hasn't been audited for a number of years, the group. So there are additional risks definitely in this plan, some of which just come from things that have happened this year, some of which are driven by the fact that there hasn't been an audit for a number of years. So that's one element. Local government reorganisation. I have been involved in local government reorganisation in the past in both Bedfordshire and Northamptonshire. In Northamptonshire, there was a significant backlog in audit opinions when LGR happened, so when the new unitaries were created. Those audits still had to be completed, and the key balances that obviously the successor bodies were interested in was the reserves, because that's how you set your budgets and what your usable level of reserves are. Cash balances, which are obviously much easier to validate because we can validate cash, and things like debtors and creditor balances, because again that impacts on what the council is liable for. So I would imagine those would be the areas we'd be looking to focus on in terms of, in advance of any reorganisation, that is what the successor body needs to know. How can they set their budgets, and what funds do they actually have, what liquidity do they have? So I don't have the answer, because as I said, the LARIG has only just been issued, which focuses on, I guess, the risk assessment process that auditors will go through in terms of rebuilding that assurance. National government, NAO, PSA are all very aware of LGR and the impact of that, so it's obviously not just Suffolk that's impacted by that, it's national, and so we have many areas that are in a similar position. So that's something that we'll have to be focused on as well, in terms of what sort of assurance processes are put in place to provide those assurances to the successor bodies in the relevant timeframes.
Thank you. Yeah. Excuse me. It's encouraging to hear you saying that you were likely to be able to give full assurance sign off for 27-28 accounts. What I'm wondering is, and this is partly about public perception really, as we move towards that, there's sort of about 3 lots of accounts or something on the way. Will you be able to modify the words which you finish on the audit with, in terms of how not full the assurance actually is? Will that, I mean, as you know, and I think to some extent you've given part of the answer that the just now to Lorraine, that the different asset classes and so on, that with the passage of time and transactions by the council, less of the balances will be uncertain. Will we be able to get that reflected in the statement of limited assurance? It's not as limited as it was last year, so to speak. I think that would be quite helpful. I don't know whether the profession generally is kind of, I mean, I know the words tend to be rather prescribed that will be used. I'm just wondering whether we can actually do something about that, so that it is clearer to the public that it's not as bad as it was last year in terms of the uncertainty.
Okay, so we obviously went through this last year in a number of councils. We didn't do an audit of your accounts last year, but on those bodies where we did do audit procedures in 23-24, as I said, the opinion was still disclaimed, but in the audit results report we included quite a detailed appendix that set out the key areas of the accounts and whether we'd got full or partial assurance over all of those individual balances. So that would be the intention in terms of what we would report for 24-25. That wouldn't be in the audit opinion itself, or is unlikely to be. As you said, the opinion tends to be sort of quite high-level wording. But we did have two different forms of wording last year, one where we were able to complete all of the procedures we planned. The wording was slightly different than those where we were not able to complete our planned procedures. So there was some distinction in the wording of the opinion itself. But as I said, the audit results report would include detail on a kind of key account by or balance by balance area in terms of whether we'd completed the work and got the assurance in those areas or not. So that will hopefully give the committee in particular, and that's obviously a public document as well, so that would give more information about where you did have full assurance and where you didn't.
Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions on specific risks, if I may. So the first is on page 35, pension liability valuation. In the left-hand column, second paragraph, the Council's pension fund deficit is a material estimated balance, and the figure is given as £14.784 million. It's the first time I've seen that figure written down, and I have to say I find it quite alarming. Just for context, I may have mentioned in committee I'm also on the Suffolk Pension Fund Committee, and I happen to know that the pension fund is very well funded at the moment. So I wonder how this deficit has arisen and why it's still there. I mean, and this is of March 24, so presumably it's changed since then. This is the first I've heard of it. Could you comment further, please?
I can comment. Melissa may well want to comment as well, I suspect. It's not unusual for local authority pension funds to be in deficits, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't got a good funding position. I can't remember what the percentage funding of the Suffolk Pension Fund is, but it's certainly not something that causes us concern. I think what happened was a number of years ago, probably 15 or more years ago, local authority pension funds were allowed to reduce contributions that were made to those pension funds to help with the national position on borrowing. And as a result of that, a number of funds, the level of funding dropped. So they used to be 100% funded, and a number of them then dropped significantly. Since then, the funding levels have been increasing. So your actuary will set each year a contribution level with a plan to bring in the fund back up to full funding. And that's what the contributions are then made within. They're valued over 3 years under the triennial valuation. In between then, the actuaries just do a kind of roll forward of assumptions. But every 3 years they will have a full valuation. The next one is due in 2025, which will feed into your 25-26 accounts. So the position will change there, but it's not something that is a concern. It is, as I said, quite common. Some funds are now moving back into an asset position, and we've started to see that over the last couple of years with deficits reducing. But as I said, it was a national policy decision, I think, a number of years ago to allow local authority pension funds to reduce the contributions to help with the national position.
Thank you. So just to clarify, that figure of 14 plus million won't appear on the council's overall financial balance? Forgiven the lack of technical knowledge.
It will be in the council's account, so it will show that pension fund deficit, and there's a pension reserve that sits on your balance sheet. But in terms of does that impact on your council tax levels, no, it doesn't, because the council tax levels are based on, in effect, the contributions rather than the accounting. So there's a distinction between what the council actually puts in to the pension fund in terms of contributions versus the accounting requirements under the accounting standards.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Could I do my second? Is that all right? Thank you. So I'm going on 2 pages to page 37, and this is the MRP section. And in the left-hand column, we have arising the spectre we encounter every meeting of Baber growth, the skeleton in the closet. As of March 24, the balance of the loan was 3 million. It's gone up since then. And the prospect of it being repaid has reduced still further. So my question is, how do we deal with that non-repayment in accounting terms? I remember there was suggestion we might be able to spread that deficit, shall we say, over the useful life of the asset, perhaps 30 years. But I haven't heard any more about that. Can you update us on that, please?
We obviously haven't started looking at this yet because we haven't started the audit, but we have identified it as a risk for the very reasons that you've outlined, because with any borrowing that a local authority takes out, particularly if you're borrowing it for a loan or an asset, there is a requirement to consider setting aside funds to basically repay that borrowing that the council has taken out if, for example, you didn't get the money back from the loan. So that's why we need to look at it to basically see, has that been accounted for? Have you set aside revenue for repayment of the borrowing that the council has, that it's taken out to give that loan to Baber? And so that's exactly what we want to be looking at in terms of the financial sustainability impact of that loan and whether there's been an appropriate provision for any non-payments.
Okay, so the idea of spreading that deficit over the life of the asset, is that something that we can do?
In terms of minimum revenue provision, that is allowable. So quite normally what would happen with minimum revenue provision is it's the borrowing is taken out for example, a capital asset, and therefore in effect the borrowing calculation can be over the life of that asset is one option. So if you purchased an asset using the borrowing and it was a 20-year life asset, then you would set aside basically the amounts to repay that borrowing over 20 years and spread it. So that's a similar principle to the loan. But as I said, we haven't started looking at it in detail yet, but that's exactly why we're looking at it, because of potential risk around non-payments.
Councillor Riley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I refer us to, where are we? Page 17, where we talk about the previous year's closing balances and this year's opening balances not agreeing. Is that right?
We're not saying that they're not agreeing. What we're saying is that because we didn't audit the accounts last year, we have no assurance over those opening balances because there were no audit procedures undertaken on them. So we're not saying they don't agree. We're saying that we don't have any assurance over them because we didn't do an audit.
Sorry, I missed half of that because you're quite... Let's go back to, where are we? Page 17, you disclaimed your audit opinion on the 23-24 accounts, okay? Have the 24-25 accounts been signed off yet?
The council hasn't yet published their 24-25 accounts. They are due to be published by the end of this month, so tomorrow, and then we will commence our audit in September.
Yes, that's great. So has the Chief Executive been involved in this disparity in figures?
There is no disparity in figures. We just did not audit the council's accounts last year, and therefore we can't say that we have any assurance over the figures that are included in this year's accounts that relate to last year. So in the financial statements, they will always have the previous year's figures in as well as the current year's. What we're saying is we can't say that the previous year's figures are correct because we did not do an audit.
So let me understand this properly. So any disparities have now been resolved?
I'll repeat the same answer, apologies. There are no disparities that we're aware of because we have not audited last year's accounts and this year's accounts have not yet been published, so we haven't looked at them. One of the checks we will be doing as soon as we get the accounts is we will be checking that they cast correctly internally, they are consistent with last year's accounts, but because we haven't seen the accounts yet, we have not been able to do that check. But we will still not be able to give you any assurance over those figures because they were not audited.
Okay, right. So we should be fairly relaxed and believe that assurances will be coming forward. I mean, you're guys signing off, presenting the accounts, signing off the audits, signing off, giving us levels of comfort that we expect from you, and do you expect to be able to do this? Or will there be caveats by saying, well, actually, we don't know what the last people did?
We will provide you with an audit opinion in December. That will again be disclaimed because of the reasons I've said, so we won't have assurance over opening balances or prior year comparators. But in our detailed reporting to you, we will set out the audit procedures we've undertaken and the levels of assurance we've been able to obtain over specific balances.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Can I run us, please, to page 83? Okay, so our audit fees, scale fees, bless them, we've gone from 157, 157,000 to 172,000, so that's that it's sufficient, which is fair enough. But Mid-Suffolk's went from 146 to 161. Now, bearing in mind that Mid-Suffolk have a larger population than Baber has, the question really is, why are we paying more per head than Mid-Suffolk? Yeah, how do we explain this to our ratepayers that, somehow, with lesser people, Baber's accounts are more complicated, more difficult, more something, but whatever it is, they're at least 10% higher than your fees for us are 10% higher than they are for Mid-Suffolk. And the question we're on account is, A, is why, which you may or may not be able to answer, but the second question is, how do we get our fees down? Well, we were paying £172,000 this year, but how do we get it down to a nil increase? What can we do to put you out of work? I mean, to decrease your fees.
Okay, so the fees are actually set by PSAA, Public Sector Audit Appointments, and they set those fees based on a number of different factors. So they will take into account, for example, the group positions, they will take into account the levels of risk, and a number of other factors. We don't actually set the fee as EY, PSAA set the fee. However, what I would note is we do then, once we've completed the audit, we determine whether there's an extra fee that needs to be charged in relation to increased risk. So, for example, the implementation of the new ledger system would be something that would drive us requesting additional fee this year for both councils. The way the council can help minimise that is obviously by producing good quality working papers, providing timely responses to audit queries, and having minimal levels of errors in the financial statements. So the best way to keep the fee low is to provide good quality accounts and support the audit effectively. And that's something we'll be working very closely with the finance team to facilitate this year, because as I said, it's new for all of us working together this year. You've got a new finance officer as well, so I think it's important that we work together very collaboratively to actually make the audit as smooth as possible, and that will help keep any additional fees lower.
Thank you. So, next question is then, are Baber providing you with good quality information and service?
We haven't yet started the audit, but obviously that's something we will be assessing as we go through the audit, and we will have regular dialogues in terms of if there are issues with that. The best thing is to communicate those as early as possible so that we can work together to fix any issues.
Okay. Very cool. Here we are. That's what I have on this paper, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. I think just to set the record straight, Debbie, the councils will be entitled to a little money back or a rebate because the audits were light touch, is that correct?
So in terms of the prior year audit fees, PSA I think are still working through and determining what they think is an appropriate fee where an audit was not undertaken. We obviously still issued an opinion and there was still work that went into that process, so there will still be a fee due. But in relation to the prior years, PSA are still looking at that and determining what they think an appropriate fee is.
Yes, I think to be clear, Councillor O'Reilly, there's a likely chance we won't be paying the whole fee, or we will get money rebated because it wasn't a full audit for the years in question, which I think is the question you were asking. It might not be as bad as we thought, and we leave that to Melissa to obviously highlight our case. That's ongoing. And that will be for both councils, I would assume. Okay, any more questions? Yes, Councillor McLaren and then Councillor Whitehead, please. Okay, whichever order you choose. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I was reading a couple of weeks ago in the City AM website that the Big Four audit firms are cutting graduate recruitment and replacing some low-level staff, which I assume is trainee junior work, with AI technology, and also sending work to low-cost areas such as Malaysia, the Philippines and India. And I just wondered how these developments might affect our audit.
Okay, so I would say we're not particularly cutting our recruitment. We've been interviewing graduates, and we've got a number of graduates starting at the end of the year. We also have some interns who actually started this week, so we're still doing that. But we definitely are also doing some of those other things you refer to. So AI is really important. It helps basically drive efficiencies in the audit process. It can be very effective, and that's what I refer to our data analytics. So we use our data analytics quite heavily. To actually do the audit. Payroll is a key area where we use analytic technology. We're also using AI in a number of other areas, and that's constantly developing. In terms of offshoring, we call it, so we do have a team based in India, and they do some of our audit procedures, so we use them very effectively and have been doing for a number of years. So they will do, for example, some of the substantive detailed testing of invoices, etc. So we use all of those things to help drive efficiencies and higher quality as well in the audit, particularly AI. If you're using data analytics, that means you can look at the whole population of data rather than just checking a sample of items, which actually improves and increases the level of assurance that we can get in the audit.
A second different question for me. You mentioned under risk about the HRA depreciation change. Was AY consulted or advised at all on this change?
No, it's a council policy in terms of your accounting policy, so we just, there's no requirement to consult or discuss with us any change in accounting policy, but we will obviously look at that to make sure that we think it's appropriate and is correctly reflected in the financial statements.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, most people have asked the questions I have anyway, but I am interested in this transfer of information. On page 30, you talk about the risk of misreporting or transferring information from one sort of system to another. Given the complexity, how common is this in council's reporting? Are we in need of some extra support, or is it a common thing, the transfer of information being misreported? Thank you.
So is that in relation to the new system implementation? Sorry, I was trying to look at the page references and I couldn't see the correct page for that. Is that the new ledger system? So, sorry, I've found the risk you're referring to now. So this is the inappropriate capitalisation of revenue spend. So that's a risk that we would include in any local authority audit plan where there is a significant capital programme. And the reason for that is there is some degree of judgment required as to whether expenditure is capital or revenue in nature. So for expenditure to be capital, it has to significantly increase the life of an asset, for example. So if you were doing new windows or new roof, that could meet the definition of capital. If it's just normal repairs and maintenance, then that would normally be a revenue item. There is a potential incentive as well for management to potentially classify more expenditure as capital, because then you can use borrowing or capital resources to finance that, as opposed to generating revenue through council tax or other funding to fund that revenue expenditure. So that's why we always identify that as a risk. So that's not specific to these councils, it's a risk we always identify, both because of the incentive, but also the fact there is some degree of judgment. There are some grey areas, I guess, as to whether something's capital or revenue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions, points to raise? Councillor Register.
Reference to page 20, the transfer of financial information from Integra to Unit 4. I just wonder, you reference to a data analytics and the use of artificial intelligence. So when I was reading this, I was sitting there thinking, well, having done this myself professionally 2 or 3 times, we use a sampling approach, and I was wondering if artificial intelligence has been used, because as you say, you can then check all the data rather than just sample randomly to ensure data integrity. And I'm wondering if you know whether that's been done in the transfer of the systems for Baber and Mid Suffolk, or whether I should be asking our finance team if that's been done.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So we undertook a full trial balance reconciliation from Integra into Unit 4. So we reconciled absolutely everything. We also brought in John Snell's team, internal audit team as well, to undertake an audit on that data transfer and the data migration as well. So, and I think that was substantial assurance, John, I think your team gave on that one. So, you know, we tried to do everything we could to give assurance that that was transferred correctly and all the checks and balances were in place.
Any more questions? Councillor Baker, yes.
Just a quick one on that transfer. Obviously balances come across, you trial balance or checks and things. The transactional data, a lot of that often isn't transferred. Is this so many years or so many months worth of transactional data, or is there no transactional data?
No, so we went live on the 1st of April. We still had access to the Capita Integra system, so all of our historical data is still there, and we've got read-only access for that, so we haven't lost that. That's still all there.
And you'll have that for a few years, I expect that will remain for this section.
Okay, well, that looks like that concludes the questioning. The paper is for noting. Thank you for attending. Yes, we've all read the paper, and we realise that we're in challenging times, shall we say, but thank you for coming and answering the queries, and well, we look forward to see you again sometime. And your friend got up very lightly, didn't he?
He does all the work though, so we'll stay for the rest of the items if that's all right, as it's our first committee that we've attended.
Yes, that's fine, and you can stay for more of the meeting or leave whenever you like, but thank you for coming. Okay, moving on to item 8, annual internal report. John Snell, please. Would you take us through this, because there's lots of quite complicated things in this, I found, so take us through it, and we'll do what we can answering questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. I'll try and make it as simple as possible. So really, I just want to sort of work through the paper and give some context to begin with, just to set the scene and give you an appreciation of the work that we do before we go into a little bit more detail. So the purpose of the report is to provide you as members with details of the work undertaken for internal audit for the year 24-25, which is required under now the old public sector internal audit standards. The report also details the review of other corporate activities which are supported by the work of the team. Now, under the public sector internal audit standards, there is a number of requirements that I'm required as the head of audit to provide you. Firstly, the annual audit opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's governance, risk and control framework, a summary of the work that supports the annual opinion, the performance of internal audit against its performance measures and criteria, a statement on conformance with the public sector internal audit standards, and the results of the internal audit quality assurance and improvement programme. Any disclosure of any qualifications to the opinion, together with the reasons for the qualification. And lastly, the disclosure of any impairments or restriction in scope of the work that we undertook. So the standards define the way in which the Internal Audit Service should be established and undertake its functions. The Council's Internal Audit Service carries out the work required to satisfy the legislation requirement and reports its findings and conclusions to management and also to this committee under its terms of reference. In January 2024, the Institute of Internal Auditors published a significant revision of their International Professional Practices framework in the form of the Global Internal Audit Standards. The revised framework became effective within the public sector from the 1st of April 2025. These are mandatory for all public functions, irrespective of each sector. The GIAS, the new standards, are supported by the SIPFA application, no Global Internal Standards in the public UK. These new standards are a replacement to the public sector internal audit standards, provide a single source to guide the worldwide professional practice of internal auditing and serve as a basis for evaluating the quality of the internal audit function. The Head of Internal Audit presented a report to this committee on the 28th of April 2025, informing members of the new standards and the impact on the internal audit function. For 24-25, the annual report from myself has been prepared against the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards, whilst considering requirements set out in the new standards, which, as I said, became effective from the 1st of April. So I just want to go through some of the key messages just for your benefit. So in line with the Council's Internal Audit Charter, again this was presented to you in April, the work has been conducted to ensure it delivers against the old standards 24-25 and the requirement for me to produce an annual Head of Internal Audit opinion for year end. So this work includes around governance processes, monitoring arrangements, ethical issues, information governance and counter-fraud management, which is subject to a separate report, again, which was presented to this committee in April. The work of internal audit continues to be resourced from existing staff and from our external audit partner TIA. This arrangement allows a direct internal provision, plus the commissioning of external skills and capacity, and provides a blend of resources from within the Council and from the external audit partner. If we move on now to Appendix A, this provides a lot more detail in terms of the work undertaken. So we took a total of 18 specific audit assignments. Against the approved audit plan, one audit has been deferred to this year, 25-26, with the agreement of myself, which is around register of gifts and hospitality and declarations of interest. The deferment was a result of sickness within my team, and also the auditee that we were undertaking work with was also off. The bank reconciliations audit is currently in draft and awaiting a management response, and at the time of writing that was the case. We've just recently received a response from Melissa and David as well, so that will be reported in midterm report. Excuse me. The results of audit work carried out in 24-25 are really positive. 88% audits having an audit opinion of either substantial or reasonable assurance. However, 2 audits were assessed as having limited assurance due to concerns raised over the lack or where existing controls in place required strengthening. And again, these were reported to you separately as agreed in a previous meeting, that any limited assurance would be directly reported to you, and then obviously you'll have full sight of it either midterm or the annual report. It's encouraging to note that only 4 out of the 54 of the audit findings have been classified as high risk, and that represents 7%. This low percentage, I think, indicates the vast majority of our operations and controls are functioning effectively, excuse me, with relatively few areas requiring urgent attention. And again, this reflects a general strong risk management framework that's in place. You'll see within the report that I've got a section on root cause analysis, and this is a technique for identifying the underlying key causes behind review findings and recommendations. And again, understanding the causes mean that management can then take action to prevent reoccurrence of negative outcomes and to promote reoccurrence of positive ones. Again, the benefits of the root cause analysis is that internal audit can be seen to be adding value to the organisation. There is potential for cost reduction. It provides lessons to be learned and better understanding of relationships, causes and effects and solutions. When raising a finding, internal audit staff seek to look at the root cause, and again, within the report there are 9 categories that our findings fall under. That's resources, competencies and training, systems, motivation and incentives, standards and policies, governance, processes and procedures, accountability and assurance and monitoring. The number of findings falling under each of these categories, as I said, is detailed under paragraph 5.7 of this report under Appendix A. The full status of each audit undertaken is reported under Section 6, again, of Appendix A. And I'd also like members to note that internal audit has unrestricted access to the Council's records and information, both manual and computerised, in order to fulfil its responsibilities. And I'm pleased to report that during 24-25 there have been no impairments that have impacted on the internal audit objectivity. In terms of other audit activities, as well as conducting audit reviews, internal audit have had significant involvement within this period in a variety of different council activities, including lending or leading on the production of the annual governance statement, which is the next report that follows, attending the council statutory officers working group to provide appropriate professional determination on governance issues as they arise, full details of the anti-fraud and corruption work. Again, as I said, that's a separate report which comes to this committee. And also a member of the internal audit team continues to support the Council's business cell for providing assurance over the administration of various business grants as they arise. In terms of performance, you'll see through the completed customer surveys, audit clients continue to express a high level of satisfaction with the service that's delivered. And also internal audit performs well against our agreed key performance indicators. In terms of the annual audit opinion, as head of audit, I am satisfied that sufficient assurance work has been carried out that allows me to form a reasonable assurance conclusion on the adequacy and effectiveness of each council's internal control environment. It is therefore my opinion that the council's framework of governance, risk, management and internal provide sufficient reasonable assurance, i.e. the system, process or activity excuse me, achieves its objectives safely and efficiently. There are no other additional audit related issues and then I'm happy to take questions from the floor. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, John. A good report, a good positive report. Yeah, your root cause analysis sounds like forward planning to me, or a mixture of the two, which is good. But yeah, certainly improvement on last year, I think. So pleased about that. Right, from the floor, questions. Yes, Councillor Marriott first. I think Councillor Dowling? No? No, Councillor Riley behind you and Councillor Baker. Councillor Marriott first, please.
Hello, I've got a few points relating to the different audits that you've mentioned here as to whether sort of action has been taken or has been considered. Regarding the assurance review of the Council's arrangements for securing financial resilience, it's saying on there's no the Director of Finance and Procurement meets regularly to discuss strategic risks with Finance Cabinet members, but there's no assurance this is done across the senior management team. Do you know if anything's in hand regarding that? Or? It's page 150.
Yeah, so in terms Obviously, this committee receives a separate report in terms of the framework, and that's something that's done by the lead officer for risk management, and also a report goes to the cabinet. So in terms of how this has been developed over the years, SLT, senior leadership team, receives regular reports in terms from the lead officer responsible for risk. So this is now being taken across the organisation, and they regularly meet. They actually look at those risks identified, and if necessary, will do deep dives where it's required.
Okay. Just below that, the Baber District Council 2024-25 medium-term financial strategy was not clearly linked to the corporate plans recommended by the LGA.
And again, we've got positive management responses for that. That's now going to be carried out, so there'll be a clear link between the two.
Great. Further down on risk management, on that page, supporting evidence is not always in place in respect of mitigation and assurances stated for risks on the risk register.
And again, that's something that has been passed to the lead responsible for risk management to ensure that those risks are actually supported by the necessary evidence, and they're filtered through to the service plans of each of service provision, and again those will be reported up to senior management.
Just one or two things regarding to public realm, that on page 153. It seems that there are several items there really relating to sort of a lack of proper procedural things set out. So relating to the there's no location of the assets listed on the inventory, which I'd have thought could be problematic. There's not a procedural document formally documented changes made to operations, and yes, on those two sort of procedural areas.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Councillor. So we spent a lot of time with the head of service responsible for public realm. There was a recognition in terms of a lack of procedures and processes that were in place. So hence why we undertook the audit, and again we are very positive with the responses from the head of service in actually implementing those. So we've got those assurances that they're now in place, and those procedures and policies are now being disseminated across the actual workforce as well.
Okay. And those areas where there is limited assurance, which you've highlighted quite a number of issues, there's health and safety, and the other one was the contracts management. Have those issues been addressed now?
They are currently being addressed, Councillor, and we will do follow-up. So any audit opinion that carries limited assurance or poor assurance, apart from being reported directly to yourselves and SLT, we will undertake a follow-up, and again those results will come back to this committee, probably mid-term report.
The contracts management one seems to be quite a long-standing one, isn't it?
Fortunately, yes, and Melissa may want to quote, but I know that historically it's been quite challenging for the head of service, particularly in terms of movement of staff, having a regulated officer that can undertake a lot of the work. So, but I can provide assurance, and I'm sure this will be backed up by Melissa, that Katrina is actually doing fantastically well in terms of putting right some of those recommendations that we have in place, and we have now actually got I don't know the job title, so a business partner which will help to bridge the gap and also help to support the head of service. So I'm hopeful, and again this will be covered in this year's report as well. So we'll be reporting back to this committee on how they've actually progressed those recommendations.
Okay, I look forward to that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Marriott. I think it does show here that internal audit is working, and yeah, thank you for raising those. Councillor Riley, please.
Mr. Snell, somebody right, it's 10 years since we've last worked together.
It's it was a bit longer, Councillor, but I didn't recognise you.
Well, that goes for both of us. I think, the working for the council does age one. First question then, page 133, everything is reasonable. What's better than reasonable?
That's page
33. Item 4.16.
And the question was around about what's reasonable.
Yeah. In my opinion, your opinion, the council's framework of control, etc., is reasonable. What's better than reasonable?
Substantial.
Sorry?
Substantial. So if I can draw members' attention to page 141, there is the audit opinions and the definitions that sit around that. So you'll see under reasonable...
I got you, substantial, right. So do you foresee your opinion in future years growing to substantial, or do you think we're stuck in a reasonable groove?
I think in an ideal world, yes, we'd all like to be substantial in terms of the audit opinion and assurance that I can provide you. Invariably, we will find one or two areas where perhaps controls need strengthening or there's a lack of control. So invariably, our audit opinions tend to shy on the reasonable assurance. Very rarely do we give substantial assurance unless we find that there's a clear bill of health. Invariably, there's not. But I think in terms of providing members with assurance, anything that's a reasonable assurance of substantial assurance is good, and I would be comfortable with those audit opinions.
So if we were working, towards Sigma 6 abilities, whatever, are you aware of any departments working towards a substantial?
I think all.
It's a bit like being at a dog show, isn't it? Being first and being number one, being number two. At the moment, everybody's number two.
And I think actually, members, you can take assurance from that if it's number two, reasonable assurance. Where I would have concerns is if it was limited or no assurance. They're the ones that were red flags for yourself, that for me, and also senior management. So, as I said, we only had two that fell under the limited assurance, and they are actually being implemented as we speak. So, as members, I would be happy that I think it was 88% of the audits we undertook either fell into that substantial or reasonable assurance opinion.
Thank you. Right, I'll move on then to page 142. And as you say, paragraph 3.4, 88% are, as you say, substantial or reasonable, which means 12% are what, drawing money under false pretenses?
No, Councillor. That 12% is reference to the two audits that fell limited assurance, which I think the previous councillor has raised as well.
Okay, all right, we'll move on. I'm not, let's see, we come up later on. Here we are. Oh, I love this one. Page 148. So we have 4 areas of significant control weakness. And management should be getting a move on as soon as possible. I love this. Are they doing so? Or, last time you and I were working together, we had all areas of people who kept saying, yes, we'll do this, and then didn't do it.
Yeah, I can provide assurance to members that, excuse me, within the report, all our recommendations now are captured on a system called Pentana. So that's all recommendations and findings. So it will track the implementation process, where before, where we obviously subject to resource levels, I could look at the high-level priority recommendations, but we didn't really have the resources to look at the medium and low. Here now that we capture all those recommendations, upload them onto this system called Pentana, and that will then provide me, and also the auditee, who's implementing it, notification of exactly where those recommendations are and whether they haven't been implemented. If they haven't, then we do the chase, and again, that gets escalated up to senior management.
Fine, thank you. Who are the auditees?
Staff, generally, that we audit.
Sorry, I mean, that wasn't really wasn't the answer I was looking for. I appreciate this is a real answer. Right. Where are our problems? Where are these 4 areas?
Sorry, 4 areas.
Well, we're saying, fine. There's 4 areas of findings, which cause concern, serious concern. What are they?
Well, excuse me, I would refer those to the limited assurance audits that we've undertaken. So that was under procurement and also health and safety training. So they're the areas that, as I said, I gave an opinion that they were limited. A number of recommendations, they've all been accepted by management, and we were doing follow-up audits, and the results of those will be passed back to this committee in October.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. I look forward to that. And what are we at? Oh, here we are. Yes. Can we go to page 159, if I've understood this properly? Lovely, 8.3. Okay. Only 90% of your audit recommendations are accepted by management. Am I reading this table properly?
All right. Are you looking at the table on 8.3, Councillor?
8.3, yeah, item number, line number 1.
So
audit recommendations accepted?
Yes.
And only 90%?
Sorry?
Only 90%?
No, the 90% is the target. 100% is what we actually achieve.
That's right. I'm having trouble with the against this blue background. That's fair enough. Okay. Thank you. Let me make that. Great. I have no more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I think we always try and be on the not negative side, but safe side, I think, with our assurances. It gives them something to work for, doesn't it? Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you. So 3 quick ones. On page 148, the bank reconciliations, obviously there's no assurance there because you're working on the draft. Given the position with external audit as well, and the change in systems, the bank rec, the last internal audit, do you know when that was done? I'm assuming it was agreed in some...
It was done previous year, so, excuse me, Councillor. Every year we look at bank reconciliations because the risk associated with it, and obviously everything flows through the general ledger account, so it's quite critical. So it's an annual report, and as I say, we're just almost finalising that report, which was will be reported back to this committee.
Thank you. And on page 149, the contract management side of things, where the limited assurance was given, obviously Katrina Browning's in post and doing a fab job, I'm sure. I'm just wondering about the software system that Labour and Mid Suffolk use for contract and procurement. Do you know what that is and what functionality it has?
So it's the one that we use across Suffolk. So it's Find a Tender. It's Suffolk Sourcing. It is. Yeah, we all use the same one.
Yeah. So I was just wondering about that because it seems sort of a lot of these issues almost seem software kind of related. Is it kind of user issues or is it?
No, I think it's probably because we've got devolved contract management across the councils. Obviously, heads of service and such are responsible for those contracts. So whilst we can give the toolkits and the good guidance around what they should be doing in contract management, it's not necessarily always the case. There are some really good examples of how that's happening, but there are some other cases where, people need more skills, they need more training, and that's what we're doing with the contract management network program, is we are upskilling everybody to make sure it's a consistent kind of contract management approach.
Okay, thank you. And then the last point I had was around, what page is it on? 155, where the health and safety, the limited assurance was given there. I'd mentioned this a few times about the Oracle system and the training. And I know in Suffolk County, all training is on that system and we're able to track and download and see what people have completed. They also mentioned about our councillor training, if there was a possibility of our councillor training going on the Oracle, because obviously we put expense claims and things through there, if that has been considered, and if that sort of could be one of the solutions, and if that's in the pipeline at all.
That's a very good question. I'm not aware in terms of the member side of things, and that might be something that I can pick up with the head of democratic services. But certainly a lot of work is now being focused, obviously, on the officer side of stuff, hence why the limited assurance. So, but that's something I can pick up with Peter.
Thank you. I also wondered, I mean, depending on the sort of relationship there, but whether there could be a lift and shift from Suffolk County Council, because they obviously have their workforce development that create all of their training, which is on Oracle, whether there could be any purchasing arrangement if the training modules or whatever aren't available within district. Just thinking about a quick solution.
Sorry, Chief Operating Officer.
Just to confirm that the use of Oracle for training records is a live conversation that's ongoing at the moment. Essentially, it comes down to resource requirements in order to have somebody to actually do the uploading and manage it all. But it is a live conversation about how we can use that. And I think in the context of LGR, one of the things that we'll need to make sure that we're really on top of is all of our staff records and employee data and all the rest of it. So I would anticipate the likelihood of an enhanced use of Oracle, but I'm not going to commit to that right now, but it is a live conversation.
Councillor McClaren.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. Is that okay? All right. John, the first question I ask every year is about how the audit team are resourced. Will the changes in national standards require additional resources to your team?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to say no, in the sense that as with the old standards, the public sector internal audit standards, I undertook what's called a self-assurance assessment, and that was again promoted up through senior management, and I have done something similar with the new standards and as an action plan. So back in, I think it's April, I brought to this committee the details of those new standards and the action plan. And what I'm proposing to do at midterm report, I will give you an update of where we are on those standards. And I can say at this stage we're pretty much like 90-odd% complete already on the issues that we need to address from an internal audit function. But I will then provide you with an update, as I said, midterm.
My second question is about the Register of Gifts and Hospitality. When I read it, I can't even imagine what that looks like. Is it possible for us to have an example sent to us of what that represents? I just can't imagine how it's recorded. Thank you.
So it's under the code of conduct for employees and also for members. So there are sort of dedicated pro formas that we are required to complete and have signed off from Gifts and Hospitality. Excuse me. Similarly, for the declaration of interests, for members, you're acutely aware of what your requirements and responsibilities are, and the same for us as officers, that if there is a declaration of interest, we should be recording that, and then that gets signed off by our line manager, and then obviously that line manager monitors that to see whether there's any implications in terms of the work that they're doing and what they're exposed to ensure there isn't any conflict of interest per se. But there are standard forms to complete.
But is there somewhere where you can see what sort of things are declared?
Yep. So what we're trying to do at the moment, Councillor, a lot of it is manual. One of the recommendations, and hence why this audit was deferred, because the lady that we were speaking to was unfortunately ill, but what we'd like to see, this is all electronicized, if I can even say it. So the idea is to make it a lot simpler for not only officers but also their line managers to monitor in terms of annual requirements, particularly with declarations of interest, to do an annual statement. It's much easier to do it electronically than continue to have it manual. So that's what we're trying to move to, but we just need to set that up within Oracle. That's the idea of what we're trying to aim for.
Thank
you. If it's helpful just to give a sense, it's things like governor of a primary school, or trustee of a charity, or parish councillor, or land holdings or directorships of companies. It's that type of information. It's very, very similar to the members' register of interests form.
My last question. The car parking concerns that are in the paper, I am assuming that was before Baber, looking at the sort of some of the deficit in that provision, that was before Baber then implemented its car parking charges.
Yes, and there's a piece of work we're going to be doing this year. It's a refresh. And we're actually collecting reconciled to the people that collect on our behalf.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. First comment that on Councillor Baker's question about training, and I actually spoken to the head of Democratic Services this morning about member training matters. So that's certainly more in hand than it was yesterday. I also wanted to ask about the contract management, etc., limited assurance. I note that we will get the follow-up on it. I was struck by also the what we'll be coming to shortly, which is in the annual governance statement, that the head of service for procurement is not satisfied that processes were adequate, etc. That stands out very starkly in the annual governance statement. I wondered whether we could hear a bit more about the staffing situation in terms of kind of reassurance now as to where we're up to, and I think that would be one for Melissa.
Yeah, so we have got a permanent vacancy for one of the business partners. We've filled one of them. We've got a permanent business partner in one of those roles, and we have got a vacancy which is being covered by an interim at the moment. We are looking at, we've been out twice for that role and been unsuccessful, so we are having conversations with other councils in Suffolk to see if there's something we can do across Suffolk to help bolster that team.
Yes, you've got a head of service, a permanent.
Yes, sorry, yeah, Katrina Browning is the head of procurement. Yeah.
Yeah, is that the same person that was recruited in 24?
Yes.
So
yes,
so there is there's a degree of stability and continuity
absolutely.
in place now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as I say, it does. It's quite stark. Not only here but also in the next item on the agenda. I think that was the particular thing I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. Bottom of page 156 to 157, there's three big money items, council tax, business rates and housing benefits, where the internal audit's done by IBC. So do you basically review their working papers and scope of work, or just basically take their word for it? And I'm also curious, do the IBC actually recharge for this work, or do we get a free pass on this important assurance?
I think in terms of the cost, I don't know whether Melissa, because they host, so you've got Ipswich, Mid Suffolk and Baber, and Ipswich are the host authority, hence why they undertake the audits on our behalf. I get to see the working papers. I also get sight of the draft report and the final report before it's issued as well. So I do have oversight on that, and I have in the past questioned some of their findings and gone back and got relevant answers to my satisfaction. So in terms of costs, Melissa, I'm not... No, I think, we get a free service. Well, keep that secret. No, so the answer is no, we don't. There's no additional cost in terms of the work they do as the host.
So, second question, page 148. In terms of payroll, it says the last main fundamental payroll audit was in May 2022. Is there another one scheduled?
Yes, and I think that will be this year. Historically, the payroll system and the processes that support that have received substantial assurance in terms of the control processes that are in place. So sometimes we would look at that and think, actually, should we do it cyclically because of the high standard? And as long as there's been no major significant changes in staff or processes, we would then perhaps review it biannually, but we're due to do it this year.
Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Marriott, please.
I was just going to ask, with the change in standards, these global internal audit standards, are you aware that there's much difference between those and the old public sector internal audit standards? Are there more of them? Are they more onerous?
Yes and yes. Yes. Fundamentally, the principles are very much the same, as you probably would expect. However, with the new standards, there's a lot more evidence-based. So the onus is on us as internal auditors to provide far more evidence, whereby we have gone through a number of processes and we've sought assurances, either verbal. Now we're actually being asked to, instead of tell me, it's show me. So that's more critical. It's a little bit more time consuming for us, but I've actually set out all the new standards, all the policies and procedures that we need to adopt. So our internal audit manual has been updated, the charter has been updated, all our pro formas have been updated that reflect those new standards. And as I mentioned earlier, Councillor, there's an action plan. So when I did a self-assessment against what the standards were requiring in terms of against what we were doing, they've formulated an action plan. As I said, I'll be bringing that back to this committee in mid-October. But to tell you again, just to reaffirm, we're pretty much 90-odd% there complete.
Questions? Commissioners now. Just one from me, John. The 4 departments with limited assurance. It'd be quite good if we could hear about them. Will you report back at any given time, or obviously I realise they're ongoing, but...
Yes, so when they originally, when we carried out the review, we found that they were limited assurance. You probably remember that I sent
Yes.
copies to you individually, and that's what was agreed at the previous meeting, which I was quite happy to do. Because they were limited assurance, we will do follow-ups, and you have the results of those. Now, if it's before, obviously, October, I can give you that. You can also, if not, you'll receive it in October.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think we're happy with that. Yes, obviously, if something is a bit weak, you're not sure, I think probably the committee does need to know first. That would be appreciated. Okay, this is for voting, isn't it, Bethany? Yes, so my computer has died again.
Page 132.
Pardon?
Page 132, I think the recommendations.
Yes, I've plotted them, yes. I have to take mine verbally in a minute.
Proposer and seconder.
Oh yes, proposer and seconder, please. Yes, Councillor Whitehead to propose somebody from Bayfair. Councillor McLaren, yes, perfect.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Right, I've got that.
Perhaps at this stage.
I was going to suggest that, yes.
Thank you, Chair. That's 8 votes for. That's carried.
That's fine. Now, I was just wondering if we've been going for an hour and a half. If anybody wants a quick comfort break, now would be a great time, I think. I don't need one, but for those that do, feel free now. Take 5 minutes. Okay, everybody, we're back in session now. If we'd all like to take our seats, please. Item 9, Annual Governance Statement. That's Tom Barker, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Annual Governance Statement is an important and helpful document. It sets out the way that we work, how we can have confidence that we're doing the right things in the right way for the right people, and that we're inclusive, transparent and accountable. It's also a formal requirement under the Accounts and Audit regulations. We do live in testing times, and it's our governance that ensures that we act lawfully and with high standards. And it's the Annual Governance Statement that sets out how we comply with the local code of corporate governance and ultimately how we deliver good governance through decision making and leadership. The report looks back at last year, but also includes some insight looking ahead at the key challenges facing the councils for the coming year. To reflect the requirements of the local code, the Annual Governance Statement includes assurance statements from various officers as well as the annual audit opinion from the Head of Internal Audit. The senior leadership team have been through the document and any comments made have been accommodated. Ultimately, the Annual Governance Statement provides assurance of the effectiveness of the Council's systems of internal control. Our governance arrangements are considered fit for purpose, and there have been no governance issues identified during the year that are considered significant in relation to our overall governance framework. I hope the report feels thorough, but if you've got any queries, then we do have John Snell here who has collated the document, and between us we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. This is everything we do at the council, really, isn't it? It affects everything, every department, every employee, every councillor, really. So important that we get it right. I've read it through and I've read it through completely well, so I'm more than happy with it. Good report, John. Credit to you both. Questions? Any comments, questions or statements? Well, I've got Councillor Matheson, Councillor Dowling and Councillor McCullough. Councillor Matheson first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've taken an increasing interest in this document over the years, and you know, I did have the uncomfortable feeling a few years ago that you know, it was a sort of statement of motherhood and apple pie, that everything was all fine and dandy, and that the next year's one was the same thing with the dates changed. But I did feel that there's a stronger sense that it's really been, you know, worked through again and thought through, and it is much better, which is great. So the particular problems that I have really was obviously there's the concern, which I think is set out clearly and honestly, about the head of service for procurement is not satisfied that the systems in place were adequate, etc., etc. And we've discussed that just now in the internal audit side. So I think that you know, that's right that it says that, and there's a goodly number of typos and things which I think we're going to give the Chair and myself and the monitoring officer or assistant thereof just to tidy those things up, so we won't get into the detail of that, which is also fine. And just bear with me a moment. Yes, I think the particular thing that's missing is that all the other management that has given a clear statement of conclusion, which you can actually see is highlighted in colour, and that is not so for the interim head of health and safety. So I'm asking that we do get a comparable statement from that person, which alas is an interim head of at the moment. I don't know whether officers can tell us where we are that we've got one at the moment, or that we've got a permanent one, or something that can give us that comparable statement to be put into that part of the annual governance statement.
Yeah, I can take that question. So I can go back to the head of service now and actually get her to provide that level of assurance in terms of an overall conclusion. So I'm happy to do that and get that from the officer concerned.
Thank you. And yeah, the other problem that I'm bound to raise is Councillor Development Working Group. It did come to light in a meeting the other day that this group had not in fact met for quite a long time. So I do think that we shouldn't be saying that it continues to plan and shape the training for all members, because it doesn't seem to be actually doing that at the moment. But we're assured it will now. As I mentioned earlier, I've spoken to the head of Democratic Services, who is relatively new, of course, to the council. So it may be that to some extent the ball got dropped between officer changes there. But I do think we must say what is true, which I compliment the contracts side, where he said not satisfied, but working hard to sort it out, which is is the right honest answer. So yeah, those are the particular issues that I wanted to raise there, and yes. So I think the other thing that I did want to comment on is that in the chief executive statement at the beginning, where he talks about the strengthening of governance, he doesn't say that, but he might have said that the fact that we've now got a permanent in-post monitoring officer is part of that strengthening. So that's good. It's a pity you didn't mention it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Matheson. Just for clarity, the councillor working group, is that across both councils? Because I wasn't sure that the Baber side even had one. I don't remember that, but if you could clarify, thank you.
That's a joint working group, yes.
And why haven't they met then? Or nothing to meet about, but it sounds as maybe there should be.
I think it's entirely possible that we had an acting head of service in place after the former head of Democratic Services left in September of 24. We had a period with an acting head of service in place, and then we recruited a permanent head of service who started in about March time. So I think it's a conversation that we need to get back into, reconvening that group and seeing what activity needs to happen. Various of the functions, so for example around planning, there has been discussion, there has been training, and things have continued. I know that there's a desire to kind of revisit some of that with some changes that flow from the annual meetings, because obviously we've got potentially new chairs of committees who've come in and such like. So it's about time, I think, that we reconvene that group and pull back together a programme of training activity and development activity.
Yep, okay, thank you for the clarity on that. That's fine. You finish?
Yes, thank
you. Councillor Dowling, please.
Thank you very much. In fact, my question is on councillor development, as on page 217, and Councillor Matheson covered several of my concerns. I'd add, in this committee, at this level, I think I very much favour student-centred learning, which means that we as members should be determining what it is we need to know, what we don't currently know, and how we can acquire that knowledge. It could be, in the past, council officers have imagined what it is that councillors don't know, and that's not been entirely accurate. Okay? So I would like to see the resurrection of that committee, of which I'm a member, so that we can focus clearly on what it is members need and how best to go about providing that. Thank you.
Well, I think what you're saying is the working group actually meets, isn't it, really, with a clear set of standing orders of what and how it's to be done, I would think, which has already been asked for.
Yes, that's right, but I'm saying the focus needs to be student-centred, learner-centred, so that our training is not done to us, which has been the case in the past, but we actively co-construct our learning with the professional experts who can provide the knowledge.
Well, I'm sure that's been noted.
Yes, I can confirm that's been noted as yes, and we will convene that group, and it will be learner-centred. There's always that question of you don't know what you don't know, so officers will help to support that conversation, but clearly counsellor co-design in the way that, not just what they learn, but the way that they learn is a really important element of that.
I've had my hand up a few times. No, just a quick one before Councillor Downing came in. I was just going to sort of...
Were you going to ask the same question?
No, I was going to ask just a statement, actually, rather than a question. It would have been helpful on this report to have the names of the people who are identified for each report, because some of I don't know who they are. So for everybody, I think it would have been helpful to know who was actually writing the statements. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I did have my hand up sometime before, actually. I just wanted to sort of say that I think there should be provision for all councillors to have some sort of input into this councillor development, you know, and with perhaps some guidance from the group, so that we can all have a say. Thank you.
And just come back, the membership of that group is on the website and is available to everyone. So obviously within your groups, the way that councillor member working groups happen most effectively is if you can feed and channel your thoughts through the members that are part of that group, then that would be a really helpful way of ensuring that that's a kind of complete conversation rather than having the conversation and then realising that some people wanted input that they weren't able to have. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to mention the same comment the councillor mentioned about the names of the heads of service. This is a great governance statement, and you know it's really engaging. It's lovely to see everybody sort of collaborate together. I wonder, is there a reason why we don't? Was there a reason that it feels like it was a purposeful reason as to why those heads of services names were not sort of listed down there? Did they just feel it was sort of signed at the end of each statement? You know.
It wasn't a deliberate, so excuse me. I'm sure the officers wouldn't be shy in terms of having their name there, and I think there is a point that you make, and I think Councillor McLaren has made. I think it's probably helpful to have that officer's name. Obviously, those officers might change, but certainly it will give you a guide in terms of who to speak to. So I don't see any reason, unless Tom's going to tell me differently, why we can't name the officers.
No, I think we can absolutely name the officers, and you can see there where particular officers fulfil more than one function, for example. My name will appear in there at least a couple of times.
Just a really small point on page 191. I was unaware we've adopted American spelling, so good practice with P-R-E-I-A-C-T-I-S-E. If that could be amended for the final draft.
When we come to the recommendations, that does include a delegation to allow me to correct these before we publish.
Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, can I just clarify then, in terms of this, the tidying up exercise and so on, are we going to add the names of officers in as discussed I've got a feeling this was resisted a few years ago, but anyway, we have new people and heads are nodding, so we'll do it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is for recommendations. So, Councillor Register.
Actually, on page 191, I think the whole of the block of text underneath needs reformatting because there's no spaces anywhere.
Sorry, which bit's that, Tim?
Page 191, where the column saying in January 2024, a new head of commissioning, one word.
It's the first line of both paragraphs within that. Something's happened with the formatting of those paragraphs, so again, we'll sort that out.
Yeah, I think that's been noted, Councillor Register. Councillor Rowe, please.
On the formatting, the best practice is to have aligned left rather than justified text because it's a barrier for people with dyslexia. So, yeah, I think that's kind of why it doesn't look like there's spaces because it's justified text. So maybe have I think digital marketing team know about the standards that we would apply for. So if they can have a quick look at whether we are achieving the standards which we aim to across the council, that'd be good.
Thank you. Councillor Riley, please. You indicated to speak, Councillor Riley? No? No, you were just waving around. Okay, sorry. Any other comments? No, this Councillor Marriott.
Just a quick one on, page 191. At the top of the page, work is underway to improve the robustness of the procurement and contract management processes. A focus on building services, as this is the highest area of council spend. There also have been problems in the area of building services, and I wondered if that was a factor as well.
That's something that obviously, excuse me, I'd have to go back to the procurement manager to establish if the situation has improved or not. But certainly, I think one council's already, I think two councils that are saying it's honest, very honest, and overspent. So I have to go back to that.
Okay.
Could I just on the point of contract management, I just wanted to reinforce that we do have a head of procurement, commissioning and procurement, and they do have a small team of business partners. Ultimately, contract management is a corporate responsibility across the entire organisation. Right. So the size of the procurement team doesn't impact inherently the degree of contract management, because there will be a contract manager in building services, but probably several, because there's so many different contracts there. But across the council, there are managers managing contracts. So I just wanted to reinforce that it's not wholly sitting within the procurement team to ensure that that contracts are managed effectively and properly. And there is ongoing work to do that. And within building services, you've got a significant uplift in performance, which would have been reported to the previous cabinet. So some of the issues that I think were identified around building services are on their way to being resolved. It is a very high area of spend, so that is the dominant kind of focus in terms of the procurement and contract management processes to ensure that they're robust.
Package of everything, which includes managing and risk and everything. Is that what you're saying? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Just on that point, it's not about this governance statement, but as you're mentioning that Suffolk sourcing, we have problems with that in Suffolk County. The systems are there, people are trained, they have quite significant training. Katrina Browning used to head up, she was obviously doing that before, fantastic job, but it comes down to the staff, and if they can slip that one through, if they've got time to fill it in, if they've got time to follow it up, and it's the accountability of those officers, to make sure that's done. And I know in the county it's not sorted. We still haven't resolved that, and it's really difficult to sort that out. But we've come across a few situations locally where some of our contracts, down the road there's issues occurring in the local area, and it's because the contracts haven't been sorted, perhaps some years ago. But it's really, really important, like how important it is, and how do we mitigate this, because the system itself doesn't sort it out. The training won't necessarily sort it out, but it's also that accountability of staff, making sure they all do it, Anyway.
Yeah, that wasn't really a question, that was just a good statement, really, wasn't it? But I think our officers are noting it, what you say, so that was good. Any other questions before we leave this one? No, that is for noting. Do I need a proposer and a seconder, don't I? Yes, well, I'll propose one and a seconder, please. Yes, Councillor Register, thank you. And I reckon we're moving to the vote right now.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Riley, do you want me to take your vote verbally?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. That's 10 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Bethany. Yep, we're moving on now. We're certainly given everything a good thorough going through. Item 10, complaints report, and that's going to be Alicia, please, if you'd like to speak to this one, Alicia.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to present the annual Code of Conduct Complaints Monitoring Report for 24 to 25 in my position as Deputy Monitoring Officer for the Code of Conduct. The Monitoring Officer is responsible for investigating Code of Conduct complaints against elected members at both district councils as well as all town and parish councils within the area. I'm hoping that the report is quite straightforward, but as a snapshot for members, overall the Monitoring Office has dealt with 58 formal Code of Conduct complaints within the last municipal year. This volume of complaints is slowly increasing year on year. So last year we dealt with 48 and 36 the year before that, so it's steadily increasing by about 10 or so a year. Our volume of complaints is largely influenced by the conduct of our parish and town councils, who make up 85% of our total complaints. This is a narrative that's supported by complaints data from our neighbouring district councils, who also deal with town and parish councils, such as East Suffolk, who reported 48 complaints, and West Suffolk, who average around 30 a year at the time last reported. In contrast, the councils without parishes, such as Ipswich Borough and Suffolk County, have only dealt with 9 complaints in the last year, so quite a disparity in volume. As well, there's still a geographical disparity in our complaints, so 39 of the complaints we received this year happened within Baber, and 19 complaints happened within Mid-Suffolk. This again has been an increase for both districts. Upon receipt of a complaint, the Monitoring Office applies 2 capacity tests. One was the councillor acting in their position as an elected member at the time of an incident, and 2, does the behaviour relate specifically to the Code of Conduct. If either of these 2 tests are not met, then the complaint will be dismissed. We have received an increase in complaints that do not meet these capacity tests in the last year. As such, the Monitoring Office has been involved in providing a great deal of advice to councillors and members of the public, and playing a significant role in resolving local tensions. 42 out of the 58 complaints were submitted by members of the public, with the 3 main areas of concern within the code being respect, declarations of interest, and bullying, harassment and discrimination. Despite the increase in volume of complaints, only 7 complaints resulted in a finding of a breach of the Code of Conduct. As a result of these breaches, most councillors were instructed to apologise to the complainant or attend further training on the code. Out of these 7 breaches, only 1 breach related to a district councillor. As set out in our handling procedure, the Monitoring Officer has about 55 working days to conclude a Code of Conduct matter. This year, the Monitoring Office has taken on average 23 working days to reach a decision. Complaints aside, this year we have adopted a new Code of Conduct handling procedure, as assisted by this committee, for which we're grateful for the support on that work. This has helped to improve the clarity of our processes, both for our own handling and for the complainants engaging with the system. We have also appointed 3 new independent persons who support us greatly with Code of Conduct complaint work. In total, there are now 5 independent persons that we share with Suffolk County Council, Ipswich Borough and West Suffolk. All 5 independent persons have an exceptional understanding of our Code of Conduct and have already provided great assistance when dealing with complex and tricky complaints. As an assurance, Tom, myself and Peter, in his position as the other Deputy Monitoring Officer for both councils, we meet every week to discuss ongoing Code of Conduct issues and complaints, and we also attend bi-monthly Suffolk-wide Monitoring Officer meetings to discuss cases of interest and best practice. Lastly, Chair, I would like to give my thanks to Jan Robinson and John Snell, who acted as Monitoring Officer and Deputy Monitoring Officer during a period of this year, as well as Claire Philpott, who provides our team with invaluable administrative support and makes sure that we stay on track. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Alicia. Is the reason that it's constantly going up, is it because we advertise the service more and it's easier to complain, do you think? Is that the reason? Every year they go up a bit, don't they? And are people getting naughty or more disrespectful, or are they more likely to complain, basically, is the question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy with our Code of Conduct handling procedures and the clarity that's come through in the last year or two in particular. So it may be a reflection that our processes are a lot more accessible and easier to follow. If I may say, it might just reflect public opinion on politics. It's up to the complainant.
Right. Okay. And Baber, of course, we all seem to be the worst. I mean, it must be something in the water over here, I think. But there we are. Tom, you were going to comment.
Yeah, well, I think it's opinion ultimately rather than fact necessarily. But there has been, I think, both some looseness in terms of standards and elected councillors' self-perception of the standards that they should uphold. And I think that at the same time is a greater propensity to complain about politicians and to not have trust in the political process, albeit district councillors are more trusted than any other part of government, so far more trusted than MPs, etc. But there is still trust is diminishing over time, and I think that does feed into an increased amount of complaints. We should also recognise, I think, that we have 1,300 parish councillors there or thereabouts across the 2 districts. So, albeit there is a significant number of complaints related to parish councils, there are 66 district councillors, there are 1,300 parish councillors, and I think parish councils are increasingly finding it difficult to ensure that they have a complete complement, to recruit people into roles. So there may be some vulnerability, I suppose, in terms of whether everybody who becomes a parish councillor is necessarily best placed to be one, because it is a challenge to recruit parish councillors in particular.
Yes, very well put, Tom. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow that up, I'm just looking at the figures. I spotted a couple of hot spots. In Baber, it's Hadley, which I represent, and in Mid-Suffolk, it's I. And I think in both cases, there's a history of infighting, feuding within those small locations, which has generated a disproportionately high number of complaints. As far as Hadley's concerned, I'm glad to say things have calmed down a lot now. So.
Wow, that's good news. Councillor McLaren, wasn't it? Yes.
Yes, I was wondering, given sort of the rise in the complaints, are we discussing this with SALC? Are we in discussion with SALC about some of these complaints?
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. So people from SALC attend our Suffolk-wide monitoring officer meetings, which happen every other month. So the CEO of SALC, as well as the advice manager, attends. So they're fully aware of the volume of complaints, and any cases of interest that not only happen here at Baber and Mid Suffolk, but also Suffolk County, Ipswich, West and East.
John, anything to say?
No, I'm fine.
No? Okay. Any other comments or questions? No, well, thank you for the report, Alicia. It's, well, it's not even for noting, it's just a statement, really, isn't it, of where we are, and thank you for that.
It's noted.
Yes, it's for noting. Thank you. And final bit is our forward plan. Pardon? Oh, we need a vote. We need a vote to note it, do we?
Yeah, because it's got a formal recommendation.
Yep, okay then, yep.
So we need proposer and seconder for that.
Proposer and seconder, John, and seconder, Simon Dowley. Yes, fine, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Riley, may I take your vote verbally? Thank you.
Sorry, Bethany, that dropped off my page. It's there now.
Thank you, Chair. That's 10 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you, everybody. Last item, the forward plan, and that is for just for noting.
Questions?
Yeah, questions. That will change, but okay at the moment. Any comments, please? We're a bit light for the 18th of August, but I imagine that may change a little. But we've got big items to deal with. Anything anyone wants, thinks we should be dealing with later on in the year? No, we're all happy. Councillor Baker? Councillor Baker, can you speak into your microphone? I can see officers.
Sorry, I'm locking this.
To hear you at times. I know it's difficult with all the gear. Thank you.
No problem. I can see there's quite a gap, isn't there, from December through to April, where there's not a lot going on. Have we compared the list of what we've looked at last year, in comparison to what we've got on the schedule for this forward plan, and have we picked up everything? I'm just surprised because that's several months, isn't it, where there's nothing?
Well, we've got a meeting with nothing fill up at the moment, but I imagine that will change and items will be put on. I think that would be correct. John, have you got any comment to make on that? We seem to be a bit light in points. Or John, you wish to comment?
Yeah, I think I think that there will always be more items. We did reach a point a year or so ago where we virtually hadn't got anything on the forward plan at all, and then I spoke to the committee officer, and she then went round all the departments and rounded up the subjects and fitted them so that we've now got a fairly full list of what we know, and as the chair has said, there will be a few more things that will come up that we don't know yet, but I think we will need that number of meetings, almost certainly.
Yes, I think we have things we do every year on Councillor Baker, but then other things will get added in, so it will populate a bit more, I would imagine. Would that be correct, Bethany, you think?
Yeah, so the current forward plan is based on the same rolling items as previous years. And then last year we had an increased number of additional items, which is why it might look a bit light this year, because we covered like backlogs and statements of accounts and things last year, so there was a lot of additional items and meetings.
It's a little difficult to forecast what will happen next year at the moment, I would suggest, but you will have work to do, I promise you. Okay, now that is just what it is, that doesn't need noting, so end of meeting. Thank you all for coming. Yes, we've got the room till 1 o'clock or 1:30 maybe, so we've just made